The rain hammered against the windows of my corner office on the 37th floor, each drop a tiny percussion against the glass that separated me from the storm outside. I should have been celebrating. The Singapore deal had finally closed, securing $15 million for my tech consulting firm in what should have been the crowning achievement of my career. Instead, I sat alone, staring at my phone, watching it light up with the fifth call from my mother in the past hour. I didn't answer. The city of Seattle stretched out below me, a patchwork of lights beginning to flicker on as evening approached. My reflection stared back at me from the darkened window, a woman I barely recognized anymore. When had I become this person? When had saying no become impossible? Let me take you back to where this all started, or maybe where it all ended, depending on how you look at it. Either way, this is my story, and I'm finally ready to tell it. This is Revenge Stories with Michelle, a home for quiet courage and true endings. If you feel my words, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Your voice matters here, your story matters too. My name is Victoria Hayes, and for 34 years, I believed that family meant sacrifice. I believed that being the strong one, the reliable one, the successful one, meant I owed something to the people who raised me. I was wrong about so many things. It was a Thursday in October when everything changed. The Pacific Northwest autumn had painted the trees in shades of amber and rust, and there was that particular crispness in the air that always made me think of new beginnings. Ironic, considering what was about to unfold. I'd taken the afternoon off, something I rarely did, to attend what my mother called a family emergency meeting. The text had come through at 6 a.m, marked urgent, the way all her messages were marked these days. Victoria, we need you home today. It's about your sister. Please don't make excuses this time. The guilt was automatic, practiced, like a reflex I'd spent decades perfecting. So I canceled my afternoon meetings, pushed back a client presentation, and made the 40-minute drive to Bellingham, where I grew up, where my parents still lived in the house I'd bought for them 5 years ago. The driveway held 3 cars when I pulled up. My father's aging Toyota, my mother's newer Lexus, the one I'd helped them purchase last year, and a BMW I didn't recognize. The front door was unlocked, as always, and I let myself in, calling out as I entered. In the living room, my mother's voice drifted back, carrying that particular tone she used when company was present, the one that suggested everything was perfectly fine and we were just one happy, functional family. The living room looked exactly as it always did. Too much furniture crammed into too small a space, family photos covering every available surface, most of them featuring my younger sister Cassandra at various stages of her life, piano recitals, dance competitions, high school graduation, college graduation, her wedding 3 years ago. My own photos were there too, tucked in the corners, smaller, fewer, easily overlooked. My mother sat on the floral sofa, her auburn hair newly styled, probably for this occasion. My father occupied his usual recliner, looking uncomfortable in khakis and a button-down shirt. Cassandra perched on the love seat, one hand resting on her very pregnant belly, her husband Derek beside her, wearing an expression I couldn't quite read. Victoria, finally, my mother said, standing to embrace me with the kind of hug that felt more like a performance than affection. We were beginning to think you weren't coming. I said I'd be here. I kept my voice neutral, a skill I'd perfected over years of these family gatherings. What's the emergency? Sit down first, my father said, gesturing to the empty chair they'd positioned facing everyone else. The setup alone should have warned me. I sat, placing my purse beside me, keeping my posture straight. What's going on? Cassandra leaned forward, her hands clasped together in that way she had when she wanted to appear vulnerable. Victoria, we need to talk about something important, and I need you to really listen without getting defensive. The phrasing itself was defensive, accusatory before I'd even spoken. I felt my shoulders tense. I'm listening. The baby's coming in 6 weeks, Cassandra began, her voice taking on that trembling quality that had always gotten her whatever she wanted. Derek and I have been looking at houses, trying to find something bigger, something suitable for raising a family. I waited, knowing there was more coming, feeling it like a storm gathering on the horizon. We found the perfect place, Derek added, speaking up for the first time. 4 bedrooms, great school district, everything we need. But the thing is, we're a bit short on the down payment. My stomach dropped. I knew what was coming before anyone said another word. How much? I heard myself ask, my voice sounding distant even to my own ears. $50,000, Cassandra said quickly, as if saying it fast would make it seem smaller. I know it sounds like a lot, but Victoria, you have to understand, we're talking about your niece or nephew here. Family. This baby deserves a good home. The manipulation was so obvious, so blatant, that I almost laughed almost. I've already helped you with 2 other down payments, I said slowly, carefully. The first house you bought 3 years ago, and the rental property last year. And we're so grateful, my mother interjected smoothly. You've been so generous, Victoria. That's why we know you'll help now, when it really matters. I sold both properties, Cassandra said, her chin lifting slightly. The market wasn't right, but this time is different. This house is perfect. You sold them? I repeated, something cold settling in my chest. Both houses I helped you buy, you sold? We made decisions that were right for our family, Derek said, his tone defensive now. We don't need to explain our financial choices. But you need to explain why you need my money again? The words came out sharper than I intended. Don't be like that, my father said, using his disappointed voice. Your sister is asking for help. Family helps family. I looked around the room, really looked at them, and something shifted inside me. The perfectly styled hair, the new clothes, the leather handbag I could see peeking out from behind the sofa, expensive, designer. The BMW in the driveway that I now realized must belong to them. When was the last time any of you asked how I was doing? The question came out quietly, but it seemed to echo in the suddenly silent room. My mother blinked. What does that have to do with anything? When was the last time anyone asked about my business, my life, anything that didn't involve money? That's not fair, Cassandra said, tears beginning to well up in her eyes. We care about you. Do you? I stood up, my purse in my hand. Can any of you tell me what I've been working on for the past 6 months? Silence. Can you tell me the name of my company? More silence. Can you tell me anything about my life that doesn't involve my bank account? Victoria, you're being dramatic, my mother said, her voice taking on an edge. We invited you here to discuss helping your sister, and you're turning this into some kind of therapy session. I'm not giving you $50,000. The words felt foreign in my mouth, strange and powerful. I'm not giving you anything anymore. The room erupted. Cassandra started crying in earnest now, her hands pressed to her face. Derek stood up, his face reddening. My mother's expression shifted from shock to fury in less than a second. After everything we've done for you? My mother's voice rose. We raised you, Victoria, gave you a home, food, education. You wouldn't be where you are without us. Where I am, I heard myself laugh, the sound bitter. I'm here because I worked 80-hour weeks, because I built my company from nothing, because I made choices and sacrifices you never acknowledged. This is about that college thing again, isn't it? My father said, shaking his head. We told you we couldn't afford to send you. What were we supposed to do? You could have said that, I replied, my voice steady now despite the shaking in my hands. Instead of telling me there wasn't enough money while paying for Cassandra's sorority dues and spring break trips. Instead of pretending you couldn't help when you just didn't want to. That was different, my mother snapped. Cassandra was younger. She needed support. And I didn't, I asked. When I was 17, working 2 jobs to save for school, I didn't need support. You were always so independent, Cassandra said, her tears stopping as quickly as they'd started. You never asked for help. I asked, I said quietly, the memories flooding back. I asked, and I was told to figure it out myself because I was the strong one, the responsible one. I moved toward the door, done with this conversation, done with all of it. If you walk out that door, don't expect to be welcome back, my mother said, her voice cold. Family is everything. Victoria, if you turn your back on us now, over money, then you were never really family at all. I stopped, my hand on the doorknob, and turned back one last time. You're right, Mom. Family is everything. That's why this hurts so much, because I finally realized I was never really family to you. I was just a resource. I left before anyone could respond, my legs carrying me to my car through muscle memory alone. My hands trembled as I started the engine, backed out of the driveway, drove away from that house I'd purchased for them, away from the life I'd spent 3 decades trying to fit into. I made it exactly 4 blocks before I had to pull over, tears blurring my vision too much to drive safely. I sat in a grocery store parking lot and cried harder than I'd cried in years, great heaving sobs that felt like they were tearing something loose inside my chest. When I finally stopped, when the tears dried and the shaking subsided, I felt empty, hollow, but also, strangely, lighter, as if I'd been carrying something heavy for so long I'd forgotten it was there, and now, suddenly, it was gone. I drove back to Seattle in silence. No music, no radio, just the sound of the road beneath my tires and my own thoughts for company. By the time I pulled into my building's parking garage, night had fallen completely, and the city lights reflected off the wet pavement like scattered stars. My apartment felt different when I walked in. The same furniture, the same art on the walls, the same view of the Space Needle in the distance, but something had fundamentally shifted. For the first time in my adult life, I was standing in a space that was entirely mine, supported by money that was entirely mine, making choices that were entirely mine. I poured myself a glass of wine, expensive, from the bottle I'd been saving for a special occasion, and stood at my windows looking out at Seattle. My phone buzzed incessantly on the counter behind me. Text after text, call after call, but I didn't turn around to check them. Not yet. Tomorrow, I'd deal with tomorrow tonight. I'd just stand here and breathe. The weekend passed in a strange sort of silence. My phone continued to light up with the calls and messages, but I turned off the sound and let them pile up, unread, unanswered. On Saturday morning, I went for a run along the waterfront, something I hadn't done in months. The air was crisp and clean, and each footfall against the pavement felt like a declaration of independence. On Sunday, I meal prepped for the week, reorganized my closet, and read an entire book just for pleasure. Small acts of rebellion against a lifetime of being constantly available, constantly responsive, constantly ready to drop everything for a family emergency that never seemed to be an emergency for anyone but me. Monday morning came with his usual Seattle drizzle, and I drove to my office feeling something I hadn't felt in years. Anticipation, not dread, not obligation, but genuine curiosity about what the week would bring. Morning, Victoria. My assistant Jamie called as I walked past the reception area. Coffee's ready in your office, and you have the department heads meeting at 9. Thanks, Jamie. I paused. Also, I need you to do something for me. Of course. Block any calls from my family. If they show up here, I'm not available. No exceptions. Jamie's eyes widened slightly, but she recovered quickly. Understood. Should I give them any specific message? Just that I'm unavailable. I continued toward my office, then turned back. And Jamie, thank you for always being professional. I appreciate you. Her smile was genuine. You're welcome. And Victoria, good for you. The morning meeting went smoothly. My team presented quarterly projections that exceeded expectations. The Singapore deal had opened doors to other international clients, and we were fielding inquiries faster than we could respond to them. This was what I'd built, what I'd worked for, and for the first time, I felt entitled to enjoy it without guilt. At lunch, I took myself to a restaurant I'd always wanted to try, but never felt I could justify the expense. I ordered the most expensive entree on the menu and ate slowly, savoring every bite, making no apologies to anyone. My phone buzzed during dessert, a text from my mother. Victoria, this silent treatment is childish. Call me immediately. Your sister is devastated. I deleted the message without responding. That evening, as I was packing up to leave, Jamie knocked on my office door. Victoria, there's someone here to see you. She says she's your grandmother. I froze, my hand halfway to my briefcase. Eleanor? She didn't give a name, just said she was your grandmother and that she'd wait as long as necessary. Eleanor Hayes was my father's mother, a woman I'd seen maybe 10 times in my entire life. She lived on the Oregon coast in a small town I'd visit exactly once, when I was 12. She and my father had some kind of falling out years before I was born, something no one ever explained, and she'd been essentially excommunicated from family gatherings. Send her in, I said, curiosity overriding caution. The woman who entered my office was in her late 70s, but moved with the confident grace of someone much younger. Her silver hair was pulled back in an elegant twist, and she wore a navy blue dress that looked both timeless and expensive. Her eyes, the same green as mine, assessed me with the kind of intelligence that missed nothing. Victoria, she said, her voice warm and rich, you've grown into quite the woman. Eleanor, I replied, standing to shake her hand. This is unexpected. I imagine so. She settled into the chair across from my desk without invitation, crossing her legs at the ankle. I heard through the grapevine that you'd finally had enough of my son's nonsense. I sank back into my own chair. The grapevine works fast. Small towns, she smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Your mother called me yesterday, of all people, trying to recruit me to talk sense into you. She seemed to think I'd be appalled by your selfishness. And are you? Quite the opposite. Eleanor leaned forward slightly. I'm here to tell you something I should have told you years ago, but I thought staying away was the right thing to do. I was wrong about that. I'm listening. Your father learned his entitlement from someone, Victoria. From his father, my late husband, who believed the world owed him simply for existing. I spent 30 years of my marriage supporting his delusions, enabling his demands, sacrificing my own dreams to prop up his ego. When he died, I made a choice. I decided I was done apologizing for taking up space. She paused, her gaze steady on mine. Your father was furious. He expected me to hand over his inheritance immediately, to continue supporting his lifestyle the way I'd supported his father's. When I refused, when I told him I was keeping my own money and living my own life, he cut me off completely. I haven't spoken to him in 23 years. The revelation settled over me like a blanket. I never knew any of this. They didn't want you to know, your mother especially. She learned early on that the best way to control people is to control the narrative. Eleanor's expression softened. But I've watched you from a distance, Victoria. I've followed your career, celebrated your successes. I've wanted to reach out so many times, but I thought maybe you were happy with your family, that you'd found something I never could. I wasn't happy, I admitted. I just didn't know I was allowed to be unhappy. That's the trick, isn't it? Eleanor smiled sadly. They convince you that your unhappiness is selfishness, that setting boundaries is cruelty, that keeping what you've earned is greed. But Victoria, let me tell you something I learned too late. You don't owe anyone your misery, not even family. Especially not family. We talked for 2 hours, well past normal business hours. The office growing dark around us, Eleanor told me about her life on the coast, about the small art gallery she'd opened, about the friends she'd made and the peace she'd found. She told me about the guilt that plagued her for the first year, the fear that she'd made a terrible mistake, the temptation to give in and go back to the way things were. But then one morning, I woke up and realized I was happy, she said, genuinely happy for the first time in decades. And I knew I'd made the right choice. When she finally stood to leave, she pressed a business card into my hand. My number. Call me anytime, day or night. And Victoria, don't let them make you small again. You're worth more than that. After she left, I sat alone in my dark office, turning her card over in my hands. The city sprawled below me, a million lights representing a million lives, and I wondered how many of those people were sitting in their own dark rooms, wondering if they were allowed to choose themselves. This is Revenge Stories with Michelle, a home for quiet courage and true endings. If you feel my words, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Your voice matters here. Your story matters too. The calls and messages continued throughout the week, escalating in both frequency and desperation. My mother's texts evolved from angry to pleading to threatening. Cassandra sent me ultrasound photos with captions about how I was destroying my niece's future. My father left voicemails that alternated between disappointment and rage. I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I did something I'd never done before I hired a therapist. Dr. Sarah Chen's office was in a restored Victorian house in Capitol Hill, all warm colors and soft lighting that immediately put me at ease. She was younger than I expected, maybe 40, with kind eyes and a directness I appreciated. "Tell me why you're here," she said during our first session, notepad ready but not intrusive. I told her everything. The years of financial support, the constant demands, the emergency meetings that were never emergencies for anyone but me, the realization that I couldn't name a single time they'd asked about my life without wanting something from it, the confrontation, the aftermath, the silence I'd imposed. "And how do you feel about all of this?" Dr. Chen asked when I finished. "Guilty," I admitted. "Like I'm being selfish and cruel and ungrateful." "Interesting," she said, making a note. "Tell me something. If a friend came to you with this exact situation, what would you tell them?" The question caught me off guard. I sat with it for a moment, really thinking, I'd tell them they weren't responsible for other people's financial problems, that being family doesn't mean being a bank, that they had a right to set boundaries, and yet you can't extend that same grace to yourself. I had no answer for that. Over the following weeks, Dr. Chen and I unpacked 34 years of conditioning. We talked about parentification, the process by which children are forced into adult roles, made responsible for things that should never be their burden. We discussed enmeshment, the lack of boundaries that makes it impossible to know where one person ends and another begins. Your family doesn't see you as a person. Dr. Chen said during one session. They see you as an extension of themselves, a resource to be utilized. That's why they can't understand your boundaries. To them, you setting limits feels like a part of them being taken away. So what do I do? You keep doing what you're doing. You maintain your boundaries. You learn to tolerate the discomfort of their disapproval, and you start building a life based on what you want, not what they need from you. It sounded simple, it was anything but. The holidays approached with their usual frenetic energy, and with them came a new wave of pressure. My mother sent a Thanksgiving invitation via email, copying my entire extended family, with a note about how she hoped I'd remember what was truly important and join them for the holiday. 17 relatives replied, all adding their voices to the chorus of family obligation. Most of them I barely knew. Cousins and aunts and uncles I saw maybe once a year, all of them suddenly deeply invested in my attendance. I crafted my response carefully, running it past Dr. Chen first. I won't be attending Thanksgiving this year. I wish you all a wonderful holiday. Short, polite, non-negotiable. The replies came fast and furious. How could I abandon my family during the holidays? Didn't I know how much my mother had been looking forward to seeing me? What kind of daughter would do this? I turned off email notifications and went about my life. Thanksgiving morning arrived cold and clear, the kind of November day that made Seattle look like a postcard. I'd accepted an invitation from Jamie, my assistant, who'd mentioned her family always made way too much food and could use an extra person to help eat it. You're sure? I'd asked when she extended the invitation. Absolutely, Jamie had said. Fair warning, though, my family is loud and chaotic and will probably ask you inappropriate questions, but the food is amazing and no one will make you feel guilty about anything. It was the best Thanksgiving I'd had in years. Jamie's family lived in a rambling house in Ballard, 3 generations under one roof, and she wasn't kidding about the noise. But it was a joyful chaos, people genuinely happy to be together, no underlying tension or unspoken demands. They asked about my business with genuine curiosity, celebrated my successes without jealousy, and never once made me feel like I owed them anything for the meal. This is nice, I told Jamie as we helped clean up after dinner. Yeah? She smiled. Good. You look like you needed some actual family time. You know, the good kind. I hugged her, surprising both of us. Thank you. My phone buzzed in my pocket as I drove home that evening. A text from Cassandra. I hope you're happy. Mom spent the entire day crying. She made your favorite dish and everything. I deleted it and kept driving. December came with its own challenges. My company's annual holiday party was scheduled for mid-month, and my mother somehow got wind of it. She called my office directly, bypassing my blocks, and convinced Jamie's replacement at the front desk that it was an emergency. Victoria, we need to talk about this distance between us, my mother said when I answered, not knowing who was on the line. Your father and I have decided to come to your holiday party. We think it's time we saw what you've built. No. The word came out firmly, clearly. Excuse me? You're not invited to my company party, and if you show up, security will escort you out. You wouldn't dare. Try me. She hung up. I called our security team and added my parents' names to the Do Not Admit list, along with photos from their social media accounts. Then I went back to work. The holiday party was elegant and professional, held at a waterfront venue with views of Elliott Bay. My entire team attended, plus several clients and business partners. We celebrated our year of successes, toasted to the future, and I gave a speech thanking everyone for their hard work and dedication. To new beginnings, I said, raising my glass, and the room echoed the toast back to me. My parents didn't show up, but the next morning, I woke to an email from my mother that made my blood run cold. The subject line read, "Legal obligation," and the message detailed their intention to sue me for financial support under Washington's filial responsibility laws. I forwarded the email to my lawyer before I'd even finished my coffee. Marcus Webb was a bulldog of an attorney, someone I'd hired years ago to handle business contracts, but who was equally skilled in family law. He called me within an hour of receiving the email. Victoria, I'm not going to sugarcoat this. Washington does have filial responsibility laws on the books. They're rarely enforced, but they do exist. My stomach dropped. So they can force me to support them? Not exactly. The laws are designed for cases where elderly parents are literally destitute and have no other means of support. We need to prove several things. First, that they're unable to support themselves. Second, that they've exhausted all other options. Third, that you have the means to help without causing yourself financial hardship. They own their house outright, I said. I bought it for them 5 years ago. The mortgage is paid off. They both receive Social Security. My father has a pension. Perfect. Document everything. Every payment you've made to them over the years. Every asset they own. Every source of income. If they want to go to court, we'll show the judge exactly how frivolous this claim is. I spent the next week compiling records, bank statements showing monthly payments I'd been making for years, records of the house purchase, the car purchase, the credit card debt I'd paid off for them twice, screenshots of Cassandra's social media showing expensive vacations and designer purchases, all funded by money I'd given them for emergencies. The picture that emerged was damning. Over the past 10 years, I'd given them over $300,000 in direct payments, plus the house worth another $400,000, and they were threatening to sue me for more. Marcus reviewed everything with a sharp eye. This is good, very good. If they actually file, we'll countersue for fraud. Every payment you made based on false pretenses, we have documentation for. Will it come to that? Honestly, probably not. This is an intimidation tactic they're hoping you'll cave rather than face a legal battle. Most people do. I'm not most people. No, Marcus agreed, a smile in his voice. You're definitely not. The lawsuit never materialized. Whether my mother's lawyer told her the claim was baseless or whether she realized I wouldn't back down, I never found out. The threats stopped, replaced by a different kind of warfare. Extended family members started reaching out individually. Cousin Jennifer called to tell me how disappointed Grandpa would be. Aunt Susan sent a long email about the importance of forgiveness. Uncle Robert showed up at my office unannounced, trying to broker some kind of peace treaty. Your mother is impossible, he admitted when I agreed to have coffee with him. We all know that. But she's still your mother, Victoria. Doesn't that count for something? It did, I said. For 34 years, it counted for everything. I sacrificed my own needs, my own happiness, my own financial security because she was my mother. And what did it get me? $300,000 poorer, and a family that only valued me for what I could give them. So that's it? You're just done? I'm not done, Uncle Robert. I'm free. He left shaking his head, probably to report back that I was beyond reason. I was okay with that. January brought a new year, and with it, new clarity. Dr. Chen and I had been working on what she called rebuilding my identity outside of family obligation, which apparently meant figuring out who I was when I wasn't defined by what other people needed from me. It was harder than it sounded. I'd spent so much of my life being the responsible one, the reliable one, the one who fixed things and solved problems, that I barely knew how to exist outside that role. Dr. Chen gave me homework. Do something just for myself every day. Not work, not obligation, just pure enjoyment. I started small, a good book, a long bath, a walk through the sculpture park. Then I got bolder. I booked a weekend trip to Portland just because I'd never been. I signed up for a cooking class, I joined a book club, and slowly, gradually, I started to remember who Victoria Hayes was before she became her family's ATM. One Tuesday evening in late February, I was leaving my cooking class when my phone rang. Eleanor's name flashed on the screen. "Victoria, I hope I'm not calling too late," she said when I answered. "Not at all. Is everything okay? Actually, I was calling to invite you to something. There's a gallery opening here next month, showcasing local artists. I thought you might enjoy it. And selfishly, I'd love to spend some time with you." I found myself smiling. "I'd like that." "Wonderful. I'll send you the details. And, Victoria, I'm proud of you. I know that doesn't mean much coming from a grandmother you barely know, but I want you to hear it anyway." Tears pricked at my eyes. "It means more than you know." The gallery opening was on a Saturday in March. I drove down to the Oregon coast early that morning, watching the landscape shift from urban sprawl to rural farmland to rugged coastline. Eleanor's town was exactly as I remembered it from that single visit 22 years ago, a small cluster of buildings nestled between steep cliffs and the endless ocean. Eleanor met me at a small bed and breakfast she'd booked for me. She looked exactly the same as she had that day in my office, elegant and composed, but when she hugged me, I felt genuine warmth. "How was the drive?" she asked. "Beautiful. I'd forgotten how stunning the coast is. It never gets old." She linked her arm through mine. "Come on, let me show you my town." We spent the afternoon walking through narrow streets, popping into shops and cafes, Eleanor greeting everyone by name. She showed me her gallery, a small space with white walls and excellent lighting, currently featuring watercolors by a local artist. "This is what I built," she said, pride evident in her voice. "After I left your grandfather, people said I was too old to start over, that I'd regret walking away. But this right here, this is mine. And I've never regretted it for a second." The evening opening was lovely, intimate, filled with people who clearly adored Eleanor and respected her taste. I stood in front of a particularly striking landscape piece, lost in the play of light and shadow, when someone spoke beside me. "Beautiful, isn't it?" I turned to find a man about my age, tall, with kind eyes and an easy smile. "It is. The artist captured something essential about this place." "That's my mother," he said, extending his hand. "I'm biased, of course, but I think she's brilliant. Nathan Ross." "Victoria Hayes?" I shook his hand. "Your mother is very talented." We talked for an hour about art and the coast and Seattle and a dozen other things that had nothing to do with family obligation or financial demands. He was a marine biologist working at a research station up the coast, and when he talked about his work, his entire face lit up with passion. "Would you like to get coffee sometime?" he asked as the evening wound down. "I'm in Seattle fairly often for supply runs." I found myself saying yes. Eleanor watched the exchange with barely concealed delight. Later, as we said goodnight at my bed and breakfast, she squeezed my hand. "He's a good man, that Nathan. His mother raised him right." "We're just getting coffee," I protested, but I was smiling. "Of course." Eleanor's eyes twinkled. "Just coffee." That night, lying in an unfamiliar bed listening to the distant roar of the ocean, I thought about how much had changed in 5 months. I lost a family, but gained a grandmother. I'd severed ties that felt essential, but discovered I could breathe without them. I'd said no, survived it, and now, maybe, I was beginning to say yes to things I actually wanted. Nathan called the following week, and we met for coffee in the University District. It was easy and comfortable and refreshingly uncomplicated. He didn't ask about my family, didn't need anything from me, just seemed to genuinely enjoy my company. We started seeing each other regularly. Nothing serious, nothing rushed, just two people getting to know each other without the weight of obligation or expectation. I like this, I told Dr. Chen during one of our sessions. I like having someone in my life who doesn't need me to be anything other than myself. That's what healthy relationships look like, she said, when both people are whole on their own and choose to share their lives rather than one person filling a void in the other. My business continued to thrive. The Singapore deal had led to contracts in Tokyo and Hong Kong. We were expanding, hiring, growing in ways I'd only dreamed about. And for the first time, I felt I deserved it, that I'd earned it through my own efforts rather than owing it to anyone else. April brought my mother's birthday, and with it, the usual flood of guilt. 34 years of birthday calls and cards and carefully chosen gifts all stopped now. I waited for the familiar weight of obligation to settle over me, but it didn't come. Instead, I felt nothing but a vague sadness for what never was and never would be. I didn't call. I didn't send a card. Eleanor sent me a text that evening. Thinking of you today. Remember, you're choosing yourself, and that's not selfish. That's survival. In May, Nathan invited me to spend a weekend at a research station where his team was tracking whale migration patterns. We stood on a windswept observation deck as a pod of gray whales passed close to shore, their massive forms gliding through the water with impossible grace. Nature doesn't apologize for taking up space, Nathan said, his binoculars trained on the whales. These creatures are massive, powerful, completely themselves. They don't make themselves smaller to accommodate anyone else's comfort. I thought about that a lot in the days that followed. Summer arrived with uncharacteristically warm weather, and I did something I'd never done before. I took a real vacation. Not a working vacation where I checked emails every hour, but a genuine phone-off, out-of-office message vacation. Nathan and I drove up to Vancouver Island, spent a week hiking and kayaking and eating fresh seafood. We talked about everything and nothing, comfortable in silences and animated in conversation. He told me about his childhood, his dreams, his fears. I found myself sharing things I'd never told anyone, not just about my family, but about myself, about who I wanted to be. You're different than when we first met, he observed one evening as we watched the sunset from our hotel balcony. Different how? Lighter, like you're not carrying something heavy anymore. He was right. The weight I'd carried for so long, the obligation and guilt and responsibility for other people's happiness, it had lifted so gradually I almost hadn't noticed. But now, standing there with him, I felt it. I felt free. In August, my sister gave birth. I heard about it through a cousin's Facebook post, a photo of Cassandra holding a tiny pink-wrapped bundle, her smile radiant. The caption read, "Welcome to the world, Lily Rose. You're so loved." I stared at the photo for a long time, waiting to feel something. Regret, maybe, or grief for the relationship with my niece that would never be. But what I felt was relief. Relief that this child would grow up without my financial support being weaponized against her. Relief that she wouldn't learn to see me as a resource rather than a person. I didn't comment on the post. I didn't reach out. I simply closed the app and went on with my day. September marked a year since the confrontation that changed everything, and Dr. Chen and I scheduled what she called a progress evaluation. When you first came to me, you described feeling guilty, selfish, and cruel for setting boundaries with your family, she said, reviewing her notes. How would you describe yourself now? I thought about it. Free, whole, myself, and the guilt. It's still there sometimes, little flashes when I think about what they'd say or how they'd react, but it doesn't control me anymore. I can feel it and choose differently. That's significant growth, Victoria. I know, I smiled. I'm proud of myself. As you should be. October brought an unexpected development, Eleanor called. Her voice strained in a way I'd never heard before. Victoria, I need to tell you something, and I need you not to panic. My heart rate spiked immediately. What's wrong? I've been diagnosed with stage 3 ovarian cancer. I start treatment next month. The world tilted. Eleanor, I'm going to fight this, she said firmly, but I wanted you to know. Not because I need anything from you, but because you deserve to know, and because I'm selfish enough to want you in my life for however long I have left. I was on the road to Oregon within an hour. Eleanor's treatment was aggressive, chemo, radiation, surgery. I reorganized my work schedule to spend long weekends with her, sitting in hospital rooms and holding her hand through the worst of it. Nathan came with me sometimes, his medical knowledge helpful in translating doctor speak, his quiet presence comforting. You didn't have to do this, Eleanor said one afternoon, as I fed her ice chips between waves of nausea. Yes, I did, I replied, because your family, real family, the kind that doesn't demand or manipulate or guilt, the kind that just loves. She squeezed my hand weakly. I'm so glad I found you again. Me too. Through her treatment, I learned what family could be. The small community around Eleanor rallied, bringing meals and running errands, and sitting with her when I had to return to Seattle for work. They asked nothing in return, expected nothing, just showed up because they cared. Nathan's mother, the artist, organized a fundraiser to help with medical expenses strangers donated. The gallery held a special show. The bed and breakfast where I always stayed refused to let me pay. This is what community looks like, Eleanor told me during one of her good days, when people choose to show up without obligation. By December, Eleanor was in remission, fragile, exhausted, but cancer-free. We celebrated Christmas together in her small house overlooking the ocean. Just the two of us, drinking champagne and eating takeout Chinese food, because neither of us felt like cooking. Best Christmas ever, Eleanor declared, raising her glass. Agreed. That night, my phone buzzed with a text from my mother. Another holiday without you. I hope you're happy with your choices. I deleted it without responding, but Eleanor had seen my face. Your mother? Yeah. Do you ever regret it? Cutting them off? I thought about it honestly. Sometimes I regret that it had to happen. But I don't regret the actual decision. They were killing me slowly, Eleanor. Not with malice, maybe, but with constant demand. I was drowning, and they were upset that I chose to swim to shore instead of letting them use me as a life raft. That's a good metaphor. I've had a lot of therapy. We laughed, and it felt good clean. Free. The new year brought new opportunities. A firm from London contacted me about a potential acquisition of my company. The offer was staggering, enough to retire comfortably for life and then some. But after a week of consideration, I turned it down. This is mine, I told Marcus, my lawyer, when he questioned my decision. I built this, and I'm not ready to let it go, not for money, not for anything. You've changed, he observed. A year ago, you would have agonized over this decision. A year ago, I was a different person. Nathan and I moved in together in March, a leap that terrified and thrilled me in equal measure. We found a condo in Fremont, with views of the ship canal and enough space for both of our lives. He turned one room into a home office for his research. I claimed another for my own workspace. This is us choosing each other, he said as we unpacked boxes, not because we need to, but because we want to. It was the healthiest relationship I'd ever had. Eleanor's health remained stable. She reopened the gallery part-time, started painting again, traveled to visit me in Seattle once a month, We built something neither of us had expected, a genuine grandmother-granddaughter relationship based on mutual respect and affection rather than obligation. In April, I got a letter in the mail, forwarded from my old address. The return address was Cassandra's. I held it for a long time before opening it, preparing myself for another guilt trip or demand. But the letter surprised me. Victoria, it read, in my sister's familiar handwriting, I'm writing this at my therapist's suggestion, so bear with me if it's awkward. Becoming a mother has forced me to examine a lot of things about my own childhood and family dynamics. I've been doing a lot of work on myself, and I've come to realize how much we took from you, how much I took from you. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm not asking for anything. I just wanted you to know that I see it now. I see how we treated you, how we used you, how we made you responsible for things that were never your burden to carry. I'm sorry for my part in that. Truly, deeply sorry. I hope you're happy. Wherever you are, whatever you're doing, you deserve happiness. You always did. With love and regret, Cassandra. I read the letter 3 times, then showed it to Nathan. How do you feel? He asked. Sad, I admitted, for what we never had, but also grateful that she's finally seeing it, even if it's too late to fix. Are you going to respond? I thought about it for a long time. Finally, I wrote back. A short note acknowledging her letter, thanking her for the apology, and wishing her and Lily well. I didn't offer reconciliation. I didn't offer another chance. I just offered grace, from a distance. That felt right. Summer came around again, marking 2 full years since I'd walked away from that family meeting. Eleanor hosted a small celebration at her gallery, just Nathan, a few close friends, and me. To 2 years of freedom, Eleanor toasted, her glass raised. To choosing ourselves, I added. To building the families we deserve, Nathan finished. We drank and laughed and celebrated the life I'd built from the ruins of the one I'd left behind. Later, as Nathan and I walked along the beach, the sun setting in spectacular fashion over the Pacific, he stopped and turned to face me. I love you, Victoria Hayes, he said. I love your strength and your courage and the way you've rebuilt yourself. I love that you chose yourself when it would have been easier to keep sacrificing. I love who you are right now, in this moment, and I want to keep loving you for as long as you'll let me. Tears streamed down my face. I love you too. He pulled me close, and we stood there on that beach as the waves crashed around us, 2 whole people choosing to share their lives. That night, lying in bed at the familiar bed and breakfast, I thought about the past 2 years, the pain of walking away, the grief of losing people I'd loved, even if they'd never truly loved me back, the slow, difficult work of learning to put myself first, the unexpected joy of building genuine connections based on mutual respect and affection. I thought about Dr. Chen's question from our first session, how do you feel about all of this? Then I'd said guilty, selfish, cruel. Now I felt proud, whole, free. The invisible girl who'd spent 34 years making herself smaller had learned to take up space. The reliable one who'd carried everyone else's burdens had learned to set them down. The successful daughter who'd funded everyone else's dreams had learned to invest in her own. And somewhere along the way, in choosing myself, I'd found myself. October came around once more. 3 years since that first confrontation. Eleanor was cancer-free and thriving. Nathan and I were talking about marriage. My company had opened offices in 3 countries. The book club I'd joined had become some of my closest friends. I'd started mentoring young women in business, helping them learn the lessons I'd learned too late. Life was good. Life was mine. My phone rang one evening as I was making dinner. An unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Victoria, my mother's voice, uncertain, hesitant. My hand tightened on the phone. Helen, what do you want? I. She paused, and I heard her take a shaky breath. I wanted to apologize for everything, for how we treated you, for what we asked of you, for making you feel like you were only valuable for what you could give us. You deserved better. You deserved so much better. I leaned against the counter, processing. What brought this on? Therapy and time, and watching Cassandra learn to be a better parent than I was, and mostly just missing my daughter and realizing I never actually knew her. Silence stretched between us. I'm not asking for anything, she continued. I'm not asking you to forgive me or let us back into your life. I just needed you to hear that I'm sorry, that I see now what I couldn't see then, that you were right to walk away. I appreciate you saying that, I said carefully. I really do. Are you happy, Victoria? The question caught me off guard. Yes, I am. Good. That's all I wanted to know. She hung up before I could say anything else. Nathan found me still standing there, phone in hand, when he came home 20 minutes later. I told him about the call, and he held me while I cried tears. I didn't fully understand grief for what never was, maybe, or relief that she'd finally seen me, or just the release of 3 years of held breath. I didn't call her back. I didn't rush to rebuild the bridge I'd burned, but I held on to that apology like a gift, proof that the path I'd chosen, as painful as it had been the right one. 2 weeks later, I received another letter from Cassandra. Mom told me she called you. I wanted you to know that we're all in therapy now, the whole family, working through our dysfunction. It's hard and painful, and we're just at the beginning. I don't know if we'll ever be a family again, the way other people mean family, but I wanted you to know we're trying, and that I think about you often, and hope you're living the life you deserve. I showed the letter to Eleanor over Sunday brunch. How do you feel? She asked, echoing Nathan's question. Hopeful, I admitted. Not for reconciliation, necessarily, but hopeful that they're breaking the patterns, that maybe the next generation, Lily and any other kids they have, won't grow up with the same dysfunction. That's generous of you. It's not generosity, it's just reality. I can hope they become better people without wanting them back in my life. Eleanor smiled. You've learned the most important lesson of all, that you can wish someone well from a distance. You taught me that. No, dear, I showed you it was possible. You did the actual work. November arrived with its characteristic Seattle gloom, but I barely noticed. Nathan and I were planning a small destination wedding for the spring, just a few friends, and Eleanor in a ceremony overlooking the ocean. No family drama, no obligation, just people who genuinely wanted to celebrate our happiness. Work was flourishing beyond my wildest expectations. We'd been approached by a major tech company about a partnership that would expand our verification software into new markets. The girl who'd worked 2 jobs to put herself through college had built something remarkable, and she'd done it by learning to say no. The holiday season approached, and with it, the usual complicated feelings. But they were muted now, distant, like a scar that had fully healed. I didn't miss the chaos, or the drama, or the constant demands. I didn't miss walking on eggshells or sacrificing my own needs or pretending everything was fine when it wasn't. What I missed, when I allowed myself to feel it, was the hope I'd carried for so long. The hope that someday they'd see me, really see me, and love what they found. But that hope had been built on a fantasy, and letting it go had been its own kind of liberation. Christmas came, and Nathan and I hosted dinner at our condo Eleanor, Jamie and her wife, Dr. Chen and her partner, Nathan's mother, and a few other friends. The table was loud and warm and full of genuine affection. No underlying tension, no unspoken demands, just people who'd chosen to share their lives with each other. To found family, Eleanor toasted, her glass raised. To the people we choose and who choose us back. To found family, we all echoed. Later, as I cleaned up while Nathan entertained guests with stories from his research station, I caught my reflection in the window. The woman looking back at me was happy, genuinely, deeply happy. Not the forced smile I'd worn for so many years, but real joy that came from living an authentic life. I'd survived walking away more than survived. I'd thrived. The new year brought new adventures. Nathan and I got married in April, on a cliff overlooking the Pacific, Eleanor standing as my matron of honor, tears streaming down her face as she watched us exchange vows. The ceremony was small and perfect, every person there because we genuinely wanted them, not out of obligation. My company continued to grow. We won several industry awards. I was invited to speak at conferences about business development and innovation. And every time I stood at a podium, looking out at the audience, I thought about the invisible girl I'd been, and I spoke to her. Your worth is not determined by what you can give to others, I said at one conference. Your value is inherent, not earned, and choosing yourself is not selfish, it's necessary. The standing ovation that followed felt like vindication for that girl who'd worked 2 jobs and put herself through college, who'd built something remarkable and then almost destroyed it trying to appease people who would never be satisfied. In June, Eleanor's cancer returned. We caught it early, and the prognosis was good, but the reminder of mortality hit hard. I rearranged my entire schedule to be with her through treatment, and Nathan supported me without question. You don't have to do this, Eleanor said once, echoing our conversation from 3 years earlier. Yes, I do, I replied, because you're family, real family. Real family, she repeated, smiling despite her exhaustion. She beat it again, and we celebrated with another Christmas and summer party. Surrounded by the community she'd built and the family I joined, July brought an unexpected email, an invitation to my mother's 60th birthday party, sent via Cassandra. The message was careful, respectful of my boundaries, making it clear the invitation came with no pressure and no expectations. I talked it over with Nathan and Eleanor and Dr. Chen. We examined my motivations, my fears, what I hoped to gain, and what I was willing to risk. In the end, I declined, not out of anger or revenge, but simply because I didn't want to go. The relationship I'd severed had stayed severed, and that was okay. I was allowed to let it stay that way. You've come so far, Dr. Chen said during one of our now monthly sessions. You've built a life you love, surrounded by people who genuinely care about you. You're not defined by your family of origin anymore. No, I agreed. I'm defined by the choices I've made. And are you happy with those choices? I thought about my life, the business I'd built without compromise, the man I'd married who saw me as a partner, not a resource, the grandmother who'd become my anchor, the friends who'd become my family, the therapy that had healed wounds I hadn't known I carried. Yes, I said, I'm happy with my choices. It was the truest thing I'd ever said. 4 years after that first confrontation, I sat in Eleanor's gallery, watching her move among guests at an opening for a new artist she'd discovered. She moved more slowly now, but with no less grace. The cancer treatments had aged her, but they hadn't diminished her spirit. Nathan stood beside me, his hand warm in mine. My phone buzzed with congratulatory messages about a new contract we just signed. Outside, the Oregon coast stretched endlessly, waves crashing against ancient rocks. You look thoughtful, Nathan observed, just thinking about how much has changed. Regrets? I turned to look at him. This man who taught me what love without obligation felt like, not a single one. And it was true. The path I'd chosen had been painful. It had cost me relationships I'd once thought were essential. It had forced me to confront truths about myself and my family that had been easier to ignore. But it had also given me everything that mattered: freedom, authenticity, joy, the ability to choose my own path and build my own family and define my own success. I was no longer the invisible girl who made herself small to accommodate others' needs. I was no longer the reliable one who sacrificed herself on the altar of family obligation. I was no longer the successful daughter whose achievements were only valuable for what they could provide to others. I was Victoria Hayes, business owner, wife, granddaughter, friend, mentor, woman who learned the hardest lesson of all, that choosing yourself is not selfish, it's survival. Eleanor caught my eye across the gallery and smiled, raising her champagne glass in a private toast. I raised mine back, and in that moment, I felt the weight of 4 years of growth, 4 years of healing, 4 years of learning that I was enough. Exactly as I was, the invisible girl had learned to shine, and she had stopped apologizing for the light. This is Revenge Stories with Michelle, a home for quiet courage and true endings. If you feel my words, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Your voice matters here. Your story matters too. That night, as Nathan and I walked along the beach under a sky full of stars, I thought about all the women out there carrying the weight I'd once carried, the daughters who'd been made responsible for their parents' happiness, the sisters who'd been designated as family banks, the successful ones who'd been taught their worth was measured only by what they could give. I wanted them to know what I'd learned, that boundaries weren't walls, they were bridges to authenticity, that saying no to others could mean saying yes to yourself, that walking away from toxicity wasn't abandonment, it was liberation, that you could love people and still refuse to be used by them. That family was supposed to be a sanctuary, not a prison, that your success belonged to you, not to people who never supported the work it took to achieve it, and most importantly, that you were allowed to choose yourself, even when everyone else insisted you were being selfish for doing so. The waves crashed against the shore in their endless rhythm, washing away footprints, smoothing rough edges, proving that even the hardest things could be worn down with time and persistence. I'd spent 34 years making myself smaller. I'd spent 4 years learning to take up space, and I'd spend the rest of my life teaching others that they were allowed to do the same. Because everyone deserves to shine. Everyone deserves to be seen. Everyone deserves to choose themselves. Even invisible girls. Especially invisible girls. And if that's selfish, then I'll wear that label proudly because I've learned the secret that took me too long to discover. The only person responsible for your happiness is you, and that's not selfish. That's freedom.